As our parents grow older, certain changes happen quietly, not loudly, not suddenly, just a few questions asked again, a few moments of forgetting something that just happened, a few odd behaviors that we reassure ourselves with. It's probably just old age. But what if it isn't? What if those small changes are not normal aging at all, but the earliest signals of Alzheimer's disease, or another form of dementia, a condition that progresses slowly, yet can completely transform the life of the person affected and the lives of everyone who loves them? Hello, and welcome. Welcome to this program series, Supporting Aging Parents with Memory Decline, a place where we share knowledge, practical strategies, and understanding for those who are caring for or walking alongside aging parents who are struggling with memory and thinking. My name is Dr. Leslie Kernisan. I am a board-certified geriatrician and the founder of Better Health While Aging and the online programs helping older parents. Over many years of working directly with older adults and their families, I have seen the same story unfold again and again. Families often realize something is wrong only when the problem has become undeniable and sometimes, tragically, too late. That is why in this episode, I want to address a question I am asked over and over. What are the early signs of Alzheimer's disease? You may already be familiar with the Alzheimer's Association's list of the 10 early warning signs, and it is an excellent resource. However, based on my clinical experience and real-world caregiving, I have learned that the earliest signs of Alzheimer's do not always show up in the same way. In fact, they are often subtle, so subtle that they are easy to dismiss. Alzheimer's does not affect memory alone. It can interfere with planning, judgment, language, behavior, emotions, and even a person's awareness of their own condition. Because of this, the first signs are often not textbook symptoms, but they are critically important if we know how to recognize them. In today's program, I will share 10 early warning signs that I pay especially close attention to as a geriatrician. This is not meant to frighten you or encourage self-diagnosis. It is meant to help you notice earlier, act sooner, and ensure that your parents receive the medical evaluation and support they need. Because when it comes to brain health, the moment we recognize a problem can make an enormous difference for the person affected and for the entire family. Before we dive into each specific sign, there is one critically important point I want you to keep in mind. The behaviors discussed in this program are warning signs, not a definitive diagnosis. An older adult forgetting things, behaving differently, or struggling with daily activities does not automatically mean they have Alzheimer's disease. In reality, many other conditions can cause similar symptoms: medication, side effects, depression, vitamin deficiencies, thyroid disorders, infections, or other medical issues that are entirely treatable. That is why the greatest danger is not noticing too early, but waiting too long. When these signs appear frequently, repeat themselves, or become more pronounced over time, that is the moment we need to pause, observe carefully, and ask an honest question. Could our parents' brains be struggling? There is another crucial point that many families do not anticipate. The person experiencing memory problems often does not realize there is a problem. They may deny it, avoid the topic, or react defensively when someone brings it up. This is not because they are stubborn or difficult. It may be because changes in the brain are affecting their ability to recognize their own condition. Understanding this helps us let go of anger, reduce conflict, and approach our parents with greater patience and compassion. The goal of early recognition is not to label someone with a disease. It is to open the door to proper medical evaluation so that older adults can receive the right support at the right time in a way that is respectful and humane. If you are watching this program and find yourself thinking, "This sounds a bit like my mom or dad," you are not alone. Comment 1 if you are currently worried about your parents or an elderly loved one. Comment 0 if you are watching to proactively equip yourself with knowledge for the future. The moment you begin to care and pay attention, that alone is already a very important first step. 10 early warning signs of Alzheimer's. According to Dr. Kernisan, 1. Short-term memory decline, the most common early warning sign, and also the one most often overlooked, is short-term memory decline. Many families reassure themselves by thinking, forgetfulness is just part of getting older. But the truth is, Normal aging does not cause a person to repeatedly forget things that just happened. When an older adult cannot remember what was said a few minutes ago, cannot recall what they just ate, where they just went, or what they were just told, this is no longer ordinary forgetfulness. In the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, the brain has particular difficulty encoding new information. This means that long-term memories, stories from youth, decades-old experiences, familiar faces, hometowns, major life events may remain remarkably clear. A person may speak fluently about the past and appear sharp and coherent. Yet at the same time, they struggle to remember what happened earlier today. This memory mismatch is exactly what misleads many families. They see their parents vividly recalling old memories and engaging in intelligent conversation, and they assume everything is fine. In reality, Alzheimer's often attacks short-term memory first, which is why the person begins asking the same question over and over, or seems genuinely surprised when reminded of information they just heard. One particularly important red flag is repeating the same question multiple times within a short period, even after receiving a clear answer. This is not because the person was not paying attention, and it is not because they are being difficult. It happens because the information is simply not being stored by the brain. What must be emphasized is this: people experiencing short-term memory decline cannot control it. They are not lazy, careless, or deliberately forgetful. This is the result of biological changes taking place in the brain. If you begin to notice these patterns occurring frequently, consistently, and becoming more pronounced over time, this is a signal that should not be ignored. Recognizing short-term memory decline early can be the first critical step toward timely medical evaluation and toward opening the door to better support for your parents in the journey ahead. 2. Repeating the same story or the same question. When an older adult repeatedly tells the same story or asks the same question over a short period of time, this is one of the signs that geriatricians pay especially close attention to. On the surface, it can seem quite harmless. The person may still speak fluently, appear cheerful, and interact naturally. Many families assume their parent simply enjoys storytelling or has a slightly unusual communication style. But in the context of cognitive decline, persistent repetition often points to a deeper issue. The most common reason is simple. The person does not remember that they just told the story. From their perspective, each retelling feels like the first time. The brain is unable to retain the memory of the recent conversation, so there is no internal stop signal telling them the story has already been shared. There are also more subtle psychological factors at play. Many people, even while experiencing memory problems, still have a strong desire to be polite, socially appropriate, and engaged. When they cannot remember new information to carry a conversation forward, they naturally return to familiar stories, topics they still remember clearly, and feel safe discussing. In other cases, repetition functions as a coping mechanism. At some level, the person may sense that their memory is failing. Repeating a well-known story allows them to avoid new questions that might confuse them or expose their difficulties more clearly. What families need to understand is this: the person who is repeating themselves is not doing it to be annoying. They are usually not aware that they are repeating anything at all. Responding with irritation, interruptions, or criticism only increases their anxiety, embarrassment, and emotional withdrawal. When repeated stories or questions occur frequently, persist over time, and are accompanied by other signs, such as forgetting recent events, difficulty managing daily tasks, or denying that anything is wrong, this becomes an early warning sign that deserves serious attention. Recognizing this early is not about judgment. It is about shifting from frustration to understanding, and from there, helping your loved one gain access to the medical evaluation and support they truly need. 3. Difficulty with complex daily activities, IADLs. Alzheimer's does not always begin with forgetting names or faces. In many cases, the earliest signs show up in very ordinary tasks, things your parents have done for years without having to think about them. In medicine, we call these instrumental activities of daily living, or IADLs. These are tasks that require planning, organization, judgment, and the ability to carry out multiple steps in sequence. They include managing finances, paying bills, cooking, shopping, keeping track of appointments, using the phone, maintaining the household, and handling administrative or paperwork-related responsibilities. In the early stages of Alzheimer's, older adults can often still take care of themselves. They may eat, bathe, dress, and move around just fine, but more complex activities begin to break down. Bills go unpaid, meals are prepared out of order, the stove is left on, essential items are forgotten at the store, or tasks that involve several steps become confusing and incomplete. One particularly important sign is what happens when you ask why. The person may struggle to explain what went wrong, or insist that everything is fine, even when the evidence clearly suggests otherwise. This is not laziness or irresponsibility. It reflects changes in the brain's executive function, the ability to plan, organize, and solve problems. For families, this stage is often confusing and emotionally charged. You may feel baffled or even irritated when your parents seem to be making mistakes with such simple things. But it is critical to remember, this is not an attitude problem. It is a brain problem. When difficulties with complex daily activities appear repeatedly, especially when combined with memory loss or repeated questions, this is an early warning sign that should not be taken lightly. Comment 1 if you have noticed a parent or loved one struggling with finances, cooking, or day-to-day management tasks. Comment 0 if you are watching to proactively recognize early signs and better prepare for the future. Your attention and awareness today may make a profound difference tomorrow. 4. Not recognizing or denying one's own difficulties. One of the signs that makes helping an older adult especially challenging and often most painful for families is when the person does not recognize or outright denies the difficulties they are experiencing. Your parent may forget recent events, make mistakes with familiar tasks, or repeat the same story multiple times. Yet when you gently bring it up, they insist, "There's nothing wrong. I'm fine." In some cases, they may even react angrily, accusing you of exaggerating or creating a problem where none exists. In geriatrics, this phenomenon is known as lack of insight, and in medical terms, anosognosia, a condition in which a person is genuinely unaware of their own illness. This is not stubbornness, and it is not intentional denial. It is a direct result of changes occurring in the brain. In the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, the brain regions responsible for self-evaluation, error awareness, and insight are often affected. As a result, the person truly cannot see their own difficulties, even when those problems are obvious to everyone around them. From their perspective, life feels normal, and anyone who suggests otherwise seems to be making a big deal out of nothing. This helps explain why many older adults do not seek medical care on their own, resist memory testing, or refuse help from their children. From their point of view, there is simply no reason to change because they do not perceive any decline. For families, this stage is often the most conflict-prone. Trying to reason them into agreement rarely works, and can instead leave the person feeling attacked, ashamed, or frightened of losing their independence. Understanding that this denial stems from neurological disease, not from attitude or personality, is the first step toward changing how we respond. It allows us to shift from arguing to accompanying, from forcing to gently supporting. Recognizing this sign early not only makes medical evaluation more feasible, but also helps families prepare emotionally for a journey that requires deep patience, understanding, and compassion. 5. Accusing others of stealing, hiding, or misplacing belongings. When an older adult begins to frequently accuse others of taking their belongings, this is a sign that geriatricians take very seriously. These accusations may be directed at adult children, caregivers, neighbors, or anyone who happens to be nearby. They may insist that someone has taken their wallet, phone, keys, glasses, or other familiar personal items, when in reality, they themselves have misplaced or hidden those objects. When an item cannot be found right away, a brain that is struggling often reaches for the simplest and most logical explanation. Someone must have taken it. What is striking is the level of certainty behind these accusations. The person is not merely suspicious, they genuinely believe the theft occurred. Attempts to explain, reassure, or present evidence to the contrary often fail and may even escalate the situation, making the person more defensive or angry. At the root of this behavior is usually a combination of memory loss and lack of insight. The person cannot remember their own actions, and they also cannot recognize that their memory is impaired. As a result, they are unable to accept the possibility that they misplaced the item themselves and instead assign blame to someone else. For families, this can be deeply painful. Being accused wrongly by one's own parent can trigger feelings of hurt, anger, and helplessness. It is essential to remember, however, that these accusations do not come from malice. They arise from disruptions in how the brain processes information and memory. When this pattern appears repeatedly, especially alongside other signs such as short-term memory loss, repeated questions, or denial of difficulties, it represents an important early warning sign of Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. Recognizing this early helps families understand what is truly happening, reduce unnecessary conflict, increase empathy, and create the conditions for appropriate medical evaluation and support. 6. The emergence of delusions, fixed false beliefs, another sign less common in the very earliest stages, but particularly important when it does appear, is the presence of delusions, also known as fixed false beliefs that do not align with reality. A delusion occurs when a person firmly believes something that most people around them know is untrue, and that belief cannot be changed by explanation or evidence. What is crucial to understand is this. For the person experiencing it, the belief feels completely real. In older adults who are beginning to experience cognitive decline, early delusions often carry themes of suspicion and fear. For example, they may believe that someone is breaking into the house at night, that their medications have been tampered with or poisoned, that a spouse is being unfaithful, that they are being watched or plotted against, or even that someone who has passed away has returned to visit them. These beliefs are not the result of imagination, superstition, or ordinary misinterpretation. They typically arise when the brain can no longer process information in a logical and consistent way, combined with impaired memory. When a person cannot recall what actually happened or fully understand the context of a situation, the brain attempts to fill in the gaps with explanations that are distorted but that make sense to them. For families, hearing these statements can be shocking, distressing, or even frightening. The natural instinct is to argue, explain, or directly contradict the belief. However, logic rarely works in these situations, because the problem is not faulty reasoning, it is impaired brain function. While delusions can also occur in other conditions, such as severe depression, psychiatric disorders, or as side effects of certain medications, their appearance in an older adult, especially someone with no prior history, should be treated as a serious warning sign that warrants careful medical evaluation. Recognizing delusions early helps families avoid mislabeling the behavior as a personality flaw and instead creates an opportunity for appropriate, safe, and compassionate intervention. 7. The appearance of hallucinations. Another sign that families should never dismiss is the presence of hallucinations when an older adult sees, hears, or senses things that others around them do not experience at all. Hallucinations can take many forms. The most common are visual hallucinations, such as insisting they see children in the house, animals moving through the room, or unfamiliar people appearing and disappearing. Auditory hallucinations can also occur when they hear voices, someone calling their name, or sounds with no identifiable source. What is essential to understand is this. For the person experiencing hallucinations, these perceptions are entirely real. They are not making things up, not seeking attention, and not pretending. At this point, the brain is sending distorted signals, leading the person to believe they are truly seeing or hearing something that exists. Among the various types of dementia, visual hallucinations are particularly common in Lewy body dementia. In these cases, hallucinations may appear quite early, sometimes even before memory loss becomes obvious. For this reason, when an older adult begins describing vivid images that others do not see, it is an especially important medical red flag. Families often react with confusion or immediate denial. "There's no one there," or "I don't see anything." However, directly dismissing the experience can increase fear, anxiety, or feelings of being invalidated, A safer approach is to remain calm, acknowledge the emotional experience, and focus on ensuring that the environment is safe. While hallucinations can also be caused by other factors such as medication side effects, infections, or psychiatric conditions, their appearance in an older adult, especially when accompanied by changes in memory, behavior, or thinking, should never be ignored. Comment 1 if you or your family have heard an older loved one describe seeing or hearing things that others do not. Comment 0 if you are watching to learn and prepare proactively. Your timely attention may help prevent unnecessary risks and open the path to more appropriate support for someone you care about. 8. Getting lost in familiar places. Another sign that raises serious concern among geriatric specialists is when an older adult becomes lost in environments they have known for many years. This may happen while driving, walking, or even moving around their own neighborhood. Many families initially dismiss this as a momentary lapse in attention or simple carelessness. In reality, getting lost in familiar places often reflects a decline in spatial memory and orientation brain functions that are commonly affected early in Alzheimer's disease and certain other dementias. The person may fail to recognize familiar landmarks, forget how to get home, or feel disoriented despite being surrounded by places they know well. Sometimes they still remember the purpose of their outing, but cannot figure out how to get where they are going or how to return. This can trigger intense fear, confusion, and a profound sense of loss of control. This becomes particularly concerning when it occurs while driving. Disorientation behind the wheel poses a serious risk not only to the older adult, but also to others on the road. This is one of the signs that families must approach with a strong focus on safety, even when their loved one insists that they are still a good driver. In the early stages, some individuals try to hide these episodes or offer vague explanations to avoid worrying others. As a result, this warning sign is sometimes only discovered after a specific incident, such as arriving home unusually late or being brought back by someone else. When getting lost begins to occur, even occasionally, it is an important signal that the brain is struggling with spatial processing and navigation. Recognizing this early allows families to address safety concerns proactively and move forward with the medical evaluation that may be urgently needed. 9. Difficulty with language and speech. Another early warning sign of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia is a change in language ability. This most often shows up as difficulty naming objects or finding the right words during conversation. In the early stages, an older adult may frequently pause mid-sentence, appear visibly stuck, searching for a word, or say, "I can't remember what that's called." These moments can happen to anyone, and occasional word-finding difficulty is indeed a normal part of aging. What becomes concerning is when this happens, often, repeatedly, and grows more pronounced over time. A particularly telling sign is when a person can no longer name a familiar object, even when it is right in front of them. Instead of saying chair, they may say the thing you sit on. Instead of phone, they might say the thing you use to call. In other cases, they may substitute incorrect words, calling a book a newspaper, or using words that sound close but are not accurate. These changes reflect damage to brain regions responsible for language and word retrieval. In medical terms, difficulty producing or understanding language is called aphasia. It is important to note that aphasia is not a diagnosis itself, but a symptom, signaling that an underlying neurological process is affecting the brain. When language difficulties emerge, people often feel confused, embarrassed, or frustrated. As a result, they may speak less, withdraw from conversations, or let others speak for them. Families sometimes misinterpret this as personality change or quietness, when in fact it is the person's attempt to avoid situations that expose their struggles. Recognizing early changes in language helps families understand what is truly happening, reduce unnecessary pressure, and most importantly, create the opportunity for a thorough evaluation of brain function at an earlier, more treatable stage 10. Unusual changes in behavior and personality. One of the most confusing and often most painful signs for families is when an older adult's personality begins to change in ways that no longer resemble who they used to be. These changes may unfold quietly over time, or they may appear suddenly and feel deeply unsettling. Someone who was once careful and frugal may begin spending impulsively, giving money to strangers, or making poorly thought-out financial decisions. A previously calm and even-tempered person may become irritable, short-tempered, or say things without thinking. Conversely, an individual who was once socially active and engaged may gradually withdraw, speak less, and lose interest in activities that once brought them joy. These changes are not simply a matter of getting older. They often reflect a decline in the brain's ability to regulate behavior, judgment, and emotions, functions largely governed by the frontal lobes. When these brain regions are affected, a person may act without fully understanding the consequences of their behavior, or without recognizing that their actions are socially inappropriate. Another common manifestation is a shift in social behavior. The person may speak bluntly or tactlessly, interrupt others, repeat inappropriate comments, or lose their sense of social boundaries. These behaviors can leave families feeling embarrassed or distressed. It is crucial to remember, however, that this is not intentional misconduct. It is the result of neurological changes. In the